Hey guys, in today's show, we're gonna talk about my, or should I say our, favorite backup camera. So stay tuned. Every now and then a product comes along that you really like, meaning it delivers on what it's supposed to do. And in this case, it's a backup camera. I know, right? Let's take a look at our favorite backup camera. Here we go. My favorite camera is the EchoMaster CAM-LF3B or C-N. Now, the B or C just stands for black or chrome like you're seeing here. So let's open it up and check it out. Comes with a warranty card. Comes with some very vague instructions. The camera comes wrapped in foam. You have the main wiring harness here. A bag of nuts and bolts. An Allen key along with some shrink wrap, and then the harness for behind the radio. This is one of the things that makes this camera special. This is actually a three-piece camera. You have the camera in the back, the main harness that runs through the car, and then the harness behind the radio. Now, before we talk about these, let's take a look at the camera itself. Now, most tag cams are kind of ugly. They have giant cameras on them, or they just look cheap. This guy here is neither. So what we have is a very thin, sexy camera. Now the reason why they give you the Allen keys is so that you can adjust these screws here, which will allow the camera to swivel. So the nice thing about this is it will blend in because it's such a small camera. So a lot of people say, hey, it doesn't have all those cool LEDs. Well, it doesn't need them. This is a 0.3 lux camera, which means it can see in very low light, which we're going to demo in a little bit. Now, like I said, there's two versions of this. The chrome will come in the same box, so the chrome looks identical to it, other than the fact that it's chrome. Now, a little bit of history about this camera. This camera has been around, this particular camera has been around for a while. It has an older model number, which is this guy right here, which is the VCI-SR-VCC or VCB. Amp of America has recently acquired EchoMaster and is bringing all its old pack audio cameras over to the EchoMaster brand. Now let's talk about the wiring harness for a minute. This is where a lot of people get confused. This has just two wires on it and an RCA. There's a red and a black. This is going to be accessory, this is going to be ground, and an RCA. Then you have this guy here. This is going off to the camera. Now the main harness has this end here, which is going to go towards the radio, and this little end here, which is going to go towards the camera. The nice thing about this is the fact that it is small and will fit through most of those accordion boots that you're trying to fit it through. Which brings us to the next point. How do you get this through an accordion boot? That's where regular zip tie is going to come into play. What you want to do is take your zip tie and cut the end off. Then get yourself some tape, take your camera connector, move it in at about 2 inches, just like so, and go ahead and tape it tightly. So get it started, and go ahead and pull it and wrap that thing on there good. Make sure that the white connector sits flush against the zip tie. And there you go. You can use this to fish it through the accordion boot. Now, if one isn't long enough, no big deal. Just tape two together. Or, if you have any of the giant air conditioning zip ties, go ahead and use one of those. But either way, this now will allow it to fish through, and because the head is so small, easily will go through. Another helpful tip is to put some hand soap on this while you're feeding it through that boot. That way it won't go through dry, and it'll pull right through just like butter. So this harness is only half of the install. The reason why I like this particular harness is that, for one, it has this very thin tip here that makes it very easy to run through things. And 2, there's no extra stuff on here. There's no little wires, there's no little red wires hanging off, there's no buttons to press, there's no loops to cut. It's just a really clean install from front to back. But there's a second part that you're gonna need. How do I trigger my aftermarket radio screen so that I can see this? And that you have to tap the reverse wire. And depending on the vehicle, there's 2 ways that that's gonna happen. One is if you're fortunate enough to have something like this, which is a smart harness. Smart harnesses typically will generate a reverse wire so that when you put the car in reverse, it automatically appears on the screen. All you'd have to do is hook this up to the radio's reverse trigger, and you're done. The second, which is more common, is actually having to go to the reverse light. Now, the nice thing about that is knowing which one you have before you start, because you're going to be running this through the car. If you need to tap the reverse lights just so happen to be where you're going to be when running this. So run something like this. This is an 18 gauge wire along with your camera wiring harness. Then you can connect this end to the radio itself. Connect this to the reverse light. Now, reverse lights are positive. So when you put the car in reverse, it's going to trigger a positive feed to the bulb. So when testing, you want to test for a positive trigger. Also, keep in mind where the reverse light is. Some are in the trunk lids, some are over in the sides. So put it in reverse before you run this wire, because they're not always at the same spot other than they're both in the back of the car. So when you go to connect this particular harness to the radio, you only have this little like 1-inch section here, which is pretty much useless. So what you want to do is cut it and get yourself a little bit more. Go ahead and strip it back. Now they also have these little soldered ends on here that I'm not a particular fan of because they just get in the way. So the wire, okay, so most cameras have this dental floss wire. Now this wire is thin, but it's not as thin as the cheaper cameras. You can still use your fingers to strip it back, but then you actually have some real wire underneath here. It's probably a 22 gauge still, but it's a nice size wire. It's strong. It's not weak. You're not going to pull on it and accidentally break the wire like you do on a lot of these cameras. So they do use a decent strength wire for this. So now what you want to do is take your harness. This just happens to be our test harness. So you're going to come over here. Now you can do it any way you want, but typically what you'll do is you'll strip back your power, your ground and power. If you don't own a soldering gun and you want to do this style connector, go ahead and take your pick tool and poke into the wire so it goes all the way through, just like that, and then make sure your wire's twisted tight. And then thread it through just like a sewing needle. And then go ahead and wrap it around the outside. And just keep wrapping until it's nice and tight and secured. And then repeat the process for the other. Now at this point you can either cover it in shrink wrap, tape, whatever works for you. That's if you don't have a soldering gun. Now if you do have a soldering gun, and you like to make this a more permanent, go ahead and add some solder at this point and then some tape and shrink wrap and you'll be good. You'll have really tight, awesome connections. And that's it for the actual camera part. We're going to go ahead and put some tape on these. So now the other connection you're going to want to make is the backup camera connection. And on a Pioneer or a Kenwood, it is purple white. And in this case, we have a bullet connector on it because we like to actually have a removable, just like this is removable here, we like to have a removable end as well. So we'll go ahead and put a bullet on our trigger and we'll go ahead and plug that in. So those are the 3 wires you have to connect for pretty much every backup camera, this one included. But like I said, this is really nice because now you have a totally, if you need to take this harness out, it's just going to unplug. This will unplug from the radio. So you can put this harness together on the bench. you don't have, there again, you don't have any of those silly little buttons, you don't have any of the little loops, you don't have some strange RCA, you don't have anything. It's a very clean, simple plug. Now let's go ahead and get this attached to the radio. So we have our radio here. Go ahead and plug in there. So on a Pioneer, the brown here in the corner is the reverse camera input. On a Kenwood looks just like this, very similar. It has two yellows. So you want to make sure you read to make sure which one is the reverse camera input. So now all we have to do is plug this guy in here. Now, on the inside of this, you'll notice there's a little tooth here. It's going to correspond to a tooth here. They also put an arrow here, and there's an arrow here. So you just line up the arrows and push the two together. It makes a really tight connection. So now we have our little connector here. Now if you notice right here on the end of the cable, there's two little grommets. So depending on what size hole you drill, there'll be a grommet to put into the metal. Sometimes you can use a little tiny guy here, other times you can use the big one. Just cut off whichever one you don't use. Now you want to plug this guy in, and it only goes in one direction, and that's with the connectors. See how they have these little lines on top and they don't on that side? So these have to match up just like that. You put it in. Now, this goes back to this guy here. It comes with this little piece of shrink wrap. The reason why it comes with that shrink wrap is before you put this together, and when you're done, I would save this till the very end, test everything, make sure it works. Go ahead and put this shrink wrap over this connector. So now we have our backup camera connected. We have our wire. We have our reverse trigger. We're going to go ahead and power this up with our bench. Now, one more thing before we move on to that. Depending on the type of car you've ran this wire through, you may want to insulate this as well as this since you're running them together. For that, there's a couple different things you can do. Obviously, you can use some 3M tape. You can pick yourself up some Tessa tape. Or depending on whether or not you have to run this wire with this, you may just want to pick up some standard flex loom. The thinner stuff here will work great if you're just doing the camera by itself. If you're having to run the power wire, go ahead and get the 1/4 inch. This is 1/8, this is 1/4. And that way you can just, get about 20 feet so you can cover it from front to back. This is great if you're doing it in a pickup truck. You don't want these wires just hanging out underneath a pickup truck. Another real common question we get when people are hooking up a backup camera is that they forget one step, is that you've done all this, but you still need to tell the radio that you're hooking up a backup camera. Some radios will automatically do it, some won't. If you're having a problem where it's not automatically giving you the backup, go ahead and go into the main menu, check for a camera setting, and make sure it's set to on. Alright, so let's go ahead and put it in reverse. For this, all we're doing is using our trigger for our power supply, hooked up. It's going to trigger the camera. And there we go. Here's our camera. Of course, you can swivel it up, you can swivel it down. Now, the one thing about this camera is it has no backup lines. That's a personal preference. I'm not a fan of cameras that have static backup lines because they're usually like this, going up into the sky, up like this, and they're very difficult to use. Some radios, when you buy them, not this particular one, but some of like the NEX radios and a lot of the Kenwood Exelon radios, all give you the ability to create custom backup lines. So you can move them wherever you want them, and makes it a lot nicer. Now this camera doesn't have them, but because it has such a great image, I like this. Now, let's go ahead and test the low light on this, because after all, you can see the detail on the wall over there. Let's make this darker and see what that looks like. All right, so what we've done is we've shut off all the lights in the install bay, and the only lights I have on me are the 2 LED lights, just single LED bulbs from our little tiny shop lights. They're illuminating me enough for you to see me plain as day. This is what 0.3 lux will do for you. It allows you, once those brake lights come on, to see in almost near darkness. Now, just to prove the point even more, I'm going to go ahead and turn one of them off. So now all we're doing is using one single LED bulb, and I'm a good 20 feet, about 20 feet away from the camera. So you'll be able to see pretty much anything at night. I'll go over into the far corner. I'll come over here into the far corner. So this is one of the features of this camera that I find awesome. is its low light capability without having any of those cheesy LEDs. And the reason for this is that they've actually used a really nice camera. Now, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, this is the one LED light that we're using to shoot over here against this wall that with this camera you can't even see. But that one LED is enough to light up that screen. Now let's go ahead and we'll do it again. This time I'll hand hold the camera. So as you can see, it's dark. That is the reflection off of Fernando's toolbox from the one LED. Now if we come over and look at our screen, we can actually see what's going on from that camera. We'll face our camera in the same direction. You can't see anything. Now, for all you camera guys out there that are going, oh, well, you have your camera set up wrong. I'm running my camera at ISO 1600 at 1/80th of a second at f5.6. And I'm getting total darkness. One thing we haven't talked about is the bag of screws that it comes with. It comes with 4 of these here. It's a nut, bolt, and a lock washer and a regular washer. It comes with 4 sets of these. And what these are designed to do is hold the plate in place. Basically, if you can get to the back side of the plate, you can put these bolts in and then it will hold it so that no one can steal it. Unfortunately for these, sometimes it makes it hard because you can't always get to the back side, or if you're doing like a lift gate and you don't really want to put these on there just in case you ever have to service this. So for that, I suggest picking up some of these. This is an M6 Allen key that will go ahead and fit into the hex head that is here. You can get them in different lengths, and then they'll screw into your existing license plate holder. So another real common question we get about pretty much every camera we put in is, why do we hook the cameras up to accessory power instead of just powering the cameras off a reverse? Well, there's a couple reasons for it. For one, sometimes the reverse lights don't have enough power to activate the camera. They'll work when the car is in idle, but as soon as you start up the car, for some reason they don't work. Some of the backup lights have sensors in them so that they can sense when the bulbs are blown. This can affect that. But the real reason is simple. It has to do with the radio you're putting in. Most radios nowadays give you the ability to do camera view when the car, I should say, is not in reverse. If you hooked it up to where this only came on in reverse, you wouldn't get that feature. So you wouldn't be able to view the camera other than when you put the car in reverse. That's the main reason why, is because it's a functionality built into the radio. If you don't want that function, that's up to you. Another feature of this camera, or should I say disadvantage of this camera, but in my opinion not really, is if you're going to use this for a front-facing camera, the camera itself, because it has none of those buttons, switches, or wires, which is one of the things that make it such a clean harness, is that it does not have reverse image. So you cannot use this for a front-facing camera unless your radio has the ability in the camera settings to switch the image. We do use this a lot of the times for the front camera if you have a license plate. As you can see from that low light we were looking at, this is a great front camera as well. Just keep in mind, it's not reversible on the camera. The radio has to do it. So let's talk about this camera a little bit more and other situations you might need to use this camera for. Now, in some cases, you need what's called a bar style camera. So for like example, if you have a van and you want to mount this to the bumper, then you can remove this portion of it and just mount this to the bumper. So that makes installation fairly nice. You just drill 3 holes, one for the wire, and then these 2 here, and you can have a nice bar camera. Now, in some installations, you actually have to mount the camera upside down because there's a handle here, and even though this is really thin, as you can see, this may get in the way of that. So to do that, you do have to remove these screws here. The problem you will run into is you do need a grinder because there's some grinding that needs to be done on this side in order for this cable to come out the hole here. So you can unscrew it, flip it. You just have to do a little bit of grinding on this side, and you'll see what I'm talking about because it's not on this side. So once you've done that, then you can go ahead and reattach it, and then you can mount the camera upside down and allow your hand to get into the handle. So just to recap why this camera is my favorite. For one, a clean, sexy look. 2, very low light, 0.3 lux, near darkness. 3, it has a 3-piece harness, camera, main harness, and then behind the radio. And in that, there's no switches, buttons, little loops, or any of that silliness. It also has a very tiny connection point, which makes it easy to run through the vehicle's boot if necessary. It comes with the heat shrink for it. The camera is fully adjustable. And of course, it comes with a bag of bolts to lock the camera onto the car if necessary. One other thing that I didn't mention was I've personally owned this camera for 7 years. I had it in our '08 Ford Explorer, had 3 different radios hooked up to it. Yeah, over the course of the time we had it, and never had an issue. It's still functioning to this very day. It's a great camera. The lens never clouded over. A lot of the times that happens. The older the camera gets, the lens will cloud over because it's a cheap lens, and the sun and the moisture and the sand and the dirt will all screw up the lens. Never had an issue with it. If it ever got dirty, went with my thumb, cleaned it off, and bingo, looked great.
Good to go.
It's not just I like installing it, I know it's a great camera because I've personally used it. So, if you want a backup camera, go ahead and check out this backup camera from Echo Master. And with that, Fernando!
Alright, so thank you for watching. You guys can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
And as always, if you have a question, leave it down below. If you'd like to talk to us personally, check us out every Monday night, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time for our Facebook Live show, where you can talk to us via texting, and we will talk back to you. You guys have a great night. We'll see you later next time. Bye.